All right, welcome to Live, Lead, and In Between, a podcast for leaders who want to be better at leading in life and everywhere in between. My name is Travis Jones, and I'm the host for this podcast. And today's topic is another listener request. And so different day, different topic. So we're going to jump into it real quick. Actually, before we jump into it, wherever you're watching this at, wherever you're listening to it at, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or if you're watching here on, if you're watching on YouTube, I'd love it if you would like, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get the updates on this if you find it helpful. And it helps me to get some content. And there's also a little line in the description where it'll give you the email for the podcast, and you can actually email topics in and things like that. And we'll kind of talk through those and work from there. So I love getting listener-based topics. And like I said, this was one of them, and it gives me something to kind of chew on. And so today's question or topic is kind of a three-parter, and when I've got it pulled up on my notes on the screen behind the screen, but when I read through it, I had to read through it at face value because I'm sure that there's more to the question or the topic than what's being presented here. So I'm just going to have to make some assumptions as to why this topic is the topic for today, and also kind of speak from my own experience with my assumptions with this, because just based off how, and I'll say it, this is just an assumption based off what I'm reading here. So I'm going to read you the comment and the topic, and then we'll go from there, and we'll kind of break them down. And I'm not sure how we'll break them down yet, but we'll give it a shot. So it says basically this: here's the topic: how to love people from a distance. Like when you love people, but they're draining you. You're pouring into them, and they aren't pouring back. So there's the statement. I'm going to read it again. How to love people from a distance. So it's asking the question: how do I love people from a distance? And kind of the reason for it is I love people, but they're draining me. And the reason they're draining me, from what I'm picking up with this, is that I'm doing all the pouring into them, and they aren't pouring anything back. So it's kind of a one-sided relationship. So what I've titled this podcast is Long Distance Relationship. So when I wrote that down, I immediately thought of how usually long distance relationships don't work. I've had one of them my entire life, and it ended poorly. I was dating someone back in my college days, and she went to a different school than me. And when I would go down to hang out with her, take a friend with me, because it was like a little bit longer of a drive, and she wound up connecting with my friend rather than me. And sometimes while I was present and didn't know, so they don't work, and they don't work for a reason. But in this case, the question, how do I love people from a distance, and the reason why, it's very appropriate. So how do I love people? Is it okay to love people from a distance? The answer to that is absolutely yes. We're called to love people, but we're not. I mean, I don't have to like you to love you. I mean, there are all kinds of people in this world that don't like me, but and sometimes I don't like me, but they're still called to love me, right, as a believer. And that's, again, everything I'm going to talk about today comes from the perspective of a follower of Christ, right? So you can absolutely love people from a distance, especially people who are toxic, especially people who have hurt you even after you've forgiven. You were called to forgive, right? So you can't leave that out. So toxic, and once you've forgiven based off hurt, you can love people from a distance. You don't have to like any of them, but you can absolutely love them from a distance, which means you care about them as a person, right? It doesn't mean that you care about their actions or anything like that. It means you care about them as a person. So how do I love people at a distance? So can you? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's completely appropriate. But this question, from, again, what I'm reading here, is when you love people, but they're draining you. So I need to love people from a distance, because, man, when I love people, I love on people. It just drains me. Just drains me. And the reason why is because I'm doing all the work. I'm pouring out, but I'm getting nothing back from this relationship. Now, I'm going to tell you a story of my life, especially when it comes to ministry. Being in ministry, you are constantly pouring out, and you have to be very careful to make sure that you take time to actually receive from others, and just receive yourself, so that you don't get caught up in this kind of cycle of, man, I'm always pouring out until I get to the point where I'm empty and I've got nothing to offer, and someone comes to me for something, I've got nothing to offer you but emptiness and hurt in that moment, and I wind up doing damage. So you have to be careful with that kind of stuff. But There's also other reasons. When I hear I love people, but they're draining. There are personality differences out there that actually can affect this particular scenario. So I'm an introvert. They're introverts, extroverts, things like that. And I kind of think I kind of know this person a little bit. This person is an extrovert, but I really secretly think they're an introvert. I'm an introvert, which means I'm okay with being by myself. I don't have to have a conversation. I can go to lunch by myself and be perfectly happy. There are people out there who can't do that. They have to have someone at lunch with them. They have to always be in a conversation with someone. I'm good. Like I can go be by myself. I can go to a park, be myself. It's fine. But when you're an introvert and you're okay with being by yourself, you like being by yourself, you get all your energy and gusto from kind of alone time. And then you meet an extrovert who gets their energy from being around other people. When you put those two people together, there's going to be this transaction that occurs where one is going to take energy from the other and the other is going to leave drained, right? So I don't know if this is playing out in this scenario a little bit, but if you have an extrovert and an introvert interacting constantly, one's going to leave drained and one's going to leave full of energy because they just took all the energy from this other person. I know a slew of people like this, and you have to, as an introvert, you have to really kind of measure and guard the amount of time that you spend with these people. Yeah, you need to interact with them all day long. And I don't mean all day long, but you get what I'm saying. You need to interact with them, but the more you interact with them, the less energy you're going to have for other stuff. So you got to kind of be careful in your interactions and measure and schedule those out. Now, I'll say being in ministry and sometimes preaching messages on Sunday mornings and things like that, as an introvert myself, there's something that happens in that interaction to where I will get in the moment when there's a lot of people in the room, you get energy from a lot of people. So I've experienced a little bit of that extrovert energy exchange that happens there. But by and large, at the end of that, I'm pretty spent, right? Because I've interacted with people all day and I'm just kind of ready to just be and veg out and zone in on TV or whatever I've got to do. My senior pastor currently, and he's an introvert. After he's done with a message, he will, or after he's done with a Sunday, he's like, I'm spent for the day. And usually, as a church, we don't schedule things Sunday afternoon that much, or we don't involve whoever did the message because typically it's a draining thing for them to be pouring out, which leads into the next thing. They're pouring out and need time to recharge as an introvert. So anyway, going back, the introvert extrovert interaction could be at play here. I'm not sure, but I think it's more, I'm like he says, I'm pouring into them, but they aren't pouring back. So that's causing me to want to pull back and love them from a distance because I just can't handle the interaction. Now, that sounds very one-sided, depending on what you're doing. And one-sided relationships are never okay. They're never good. They wind up becoming toxic relationships, and they also wind up becoming long distance relationships where you pull back from that because you're not getting what you need out of the relationship. And relationships are like that, right? A lot of people will say that relationships are 50-50. But I don't necessarily believe that they are. And I look at the marriage relationship as an example of that. Marriage isn't 50-50, it's 100-100. I give 100% to the relationship, whether my spouse is going to give 100% or not. I'm going to give 100%. My hope is that she's giving 100% as well. And if we're both giving 100%, then both needs are met. So from a marriage perspective, relationships, pouring into other people and things like that, it not kind of flying like that, they're 100%. Non-marriage relationships, I still kind of think are like that. If I've got a friend, I'm going to pour 100% into that relationship, whether they do or not. Now, there'll come a moment, though, where I'm poured myself out, and if they aren't pouring back, that means they may not care as much about me as I do about them, and so then I have to make a decision, is this energy well spent, and should I continue to be their friend, love them at a distance in this, because they obviously don't care as much about me as I do about them. So I think it's completely appropriate with that. So the question is, how do I love people at a distance? Well, you just create space. You create space and do what's healthy for you in that moment. Because if you don't, you're going to wind up paying for it in the end. And you'll pay dividends on that. You'll pay relationally, you'll pay mentally, physically, all those things you'll pay for if you don't love people at a distance. If you're constantly pouring into a relationship and you're not ever getting anybody pouring back into you, you wind up sitting at this place of unhealth, feeling burned by things. So I think, I don't know if I answered that question as well as it was phrased, but I'm pretty sure that's the motivation that's coming from it. If I'm not mistaken, how do I love people from a distance when you love people? So yeah, I think that kind of landed that. So, I'm going to stop right there with that. And, this has been a little bit shorter of a podcast than the last one. So if you found this helpful, great. Leave a comment. Like I said, do all those fun things that help the podcast grow. If you didn't, man, I'm sorry that you didn't find it helpful. And like I said, I hope it answered that listener question or that listener topic appropriately. So with that said, this has been Live, Lead, and In Between, and I would encourage you to lead well in everything you do.